What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Giant Topic Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Cruz, and we have some news today. As you guys are aware, or if you're not aware, the New York Giants are going to be hiring Matt Nagy, or should I say Nagy, uh, as their offensive coordinator. Long time coming at this point, it feels like, right? Within the last 2 weeks, the New York football Giants have been looking for their next offensive coordinator, right? You heard guys like Davis Webb, you heard guys like Alex Tanney, Cliff Kingsbury. Obviously, we know that the Giants wanted uh, obviously Todd Monken before he took the Cleveland Browns job. And ultimately, Matt Nagy ends up being the hire. So we have a lot to talk about today. I think it's going to be a really fun stream for you guys. But we got some people in the chat. Chris, we appreciate you stopping by. He says, please make this hire make sense. Buddy, we're going to try to do that today. We are definitely going to try to do that today. But let's talk about it, right? Now, Matt Nagy, right? A lot of people know him for obviously his stint with the Chicago Bears, 4 years spent as the Chicago Bears head coach, spent 4 years with the Kansas City Chiefs as well in various different roles. But sticking with the Chicago Bears, right? Let's start there. Through 2018 and 2021, he had 34 wins, 31 losses, took them to the playoffs. You could argue that he overachieved with the Chicago Bears, right? Now, I do think that if I'm looking at it right, considering the fact that you lose out on Todd Monken, considering the fact that you are interviewing guys like Kingsbury, Tanney, Davis Webb, who ends up going back to the Denver Broncos, getting promoted to be their OC. I think personally, this is a uninspiring hire. I think this is the result of being lucked out with Todd Monken getting the Cleveland head coaching job. I think that a lot of people kind of penciled that in. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the Giants organization thought that Todd Monken was going to become the New York Giants' next offensive coordinator. And understandably so. I don't think anybody really had him penciled in to realistically become the Cleveland Browns' next head coach. But obviously, he gets hired and the Giants have to pivot. Now, I will say this much, right? We know that Harbaugh wants someone that is familiar with calling plays, right? We know that he called plays in Chicago. Answering your question here, Chris, he says, did he call plays in Chicago? He obviously didn't call plays at KC. He has to call plays here. Yeah, he absolutely does have to call plays here. And I see that we're having a little bit of a camera issue, so I apologize and hope you guys can bear with us through that. But we know that Harbaugh wanted someone that calls plays, right? That's not Alex Tanney. That's not Davis Webb, right? You could argue that Cliff Kingsbury was going to be a somewhat risky hire, considering the fact that he has had multiple stints in the NFL and they've kind of soured up. You can argue some was his fault, some wasn't. I think he's one of those coaches that kind of fails forward somehow in the NFL and in college as well. But I think a lot of Giants fans, seeing the reaction on Twitter, it's very mixed, right? You have people that aren't entirely high on this hire. You have people that want to, be patient with John Harbaugh and give him that grace. Understandably so, especially when you look at John Harbaugh's resume. Me personally, though, despite it being an uninspiring hire, until we see it, right? Until because I think it's too early to say that this is a bad hire. We could say it's an uninspiring hire. You could argue that they probably should have kept Kapka at that point, but I think it's too early to say that this is a bad hire for John Harbaugh and the New York Football Giants. I will say I think this could potentially be a 1 year stint, regardless of whether if this goes good, regardless of whether if this goes bad. If this goes good and we see a above average offense or maybe even an average offense with the New York Giants, right, calling plays, this could catapult him to getting a head coaching job next year. If this goes bad, and obviously, this offense isn't what John Harbaugh envisioned this offense to be with hiring Matt Nagy. If you look at John Harbaugh's history, he isn't afraid necessarily to move off of coordinators when it's time to move off of them. Now, I will say, after speaking with Raven C, he's a Ravens content creator, covers the Ravens. If you have not already, definitely go check out that episode on this podcast. We broke down the hiring of John Harbaugh from a Ravens fan's perspective. He does also have a tendency to hold on to certain coordinators a little too long, whether that's Greg Roman, whether that's Zach Orr, especially considering the fact that if he was retained in Baltimore, Zach Orr was most likely going to be coming back. And their defense the last 3 years has not been that good. But if you look outside of that, he does have a history of moving off of coordinators if things aren't going well or when the time is right. So I'll give him that benefit of the doubt, right? I do think that this is a very important hire, right? Especially for Jackson Dart's development. I think if you hire a bad offensive coordinator, this could stint Dart's growth. And I do think that that would be disastrous, if we're being honest here. I think that would be very disastrous, not just to Jackson Dart, but also to the New York Giants as well, who are setting themselves up for high expectations, especially when you hire a guy like John Harbaugh and the resume that he brings. I will say, though, that again, while I think that this is a uninspiring hire, I think that there are some pros that you could take with this hire, right? So again, we can argue that he overachieved with the Chicago Bears, right? Sent them to the playoffs. You look at the quarterbacks that he dealt with, Justin Fields, Mitch Trubisky, and in hindsight, there's not a lot of coaches that could win with those two quarterbacks, right? So the fact that he was able to go to the playoffs with those quarterbacks, with at least Mitch Trubisky, let's say, says something, right? Their number one wide receiver being Allen Robinson. Defensively, obviously he's not going to be covering the defense here, but defensively they looked all right. He overachieved, especially in I believe it was 2018 with the Chicago Bears, where they went 12-4. I will say, if you look at his stint in Chicago, there are some positives to take away. He does use tight ends a lot. So if you're Theo Johnson, if Daniel Bellinger comes back to the New York Giants, right, if he's re-signed, these are guys that could potentially get more involved in this offense. We could see more production out of these guys. I think when you also look at the Chicago Bears, while Allen Robinson was over there, he was relatively effective with Mitch Trubisky under center, right? So you switch out Allen Robinson and you replace that with Malik Neighbors. You switch out Mitch Trubisky and you insert Jackson Dart. It should be a better product. Should, but we don't know. That's the thing about this hire, right? Because this is an underwhelming hire, right? But we have no clue whether this hire is going to work or not. That's why I said earlier in the pod that, I think it's too early to say that this is a bad hire. This could be a very good hire. We have no idea, right? Especially when you take into consideration that John Harbaugh does have a track history of hiring good offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators as well. But if you go to the Kansas City side of things, right, Mahomes has praised them countless times for his help, his hand in Mahomes' development, right? Then you also look at, I believe it was in 2017, late in the year, Andy Reid turned over the play calling to Matt Nagy, and the offense took a significant jump forward, right? They were fourth in EPA per play. They were seventh in success rate, third in dropback EPA, 10th in rush EPA. And before that, they were around the 7th to 10th range in those categories. So you could argue that they took a step forward under Matt Nagy. I do think that he is a creative play caller as well. So I do think that this offense will be a little bit more creative than what we've seen, especially with Brian Dable the last 2 years. I do expect, though, guys like, again, Theo Johnson. You could argue Jackson Dart as well could potentially take a significant step forward. Now, with pros, there's obviously cons, right? Now, one of the biggest cons, and you could talk about this to Chicago Bears fans, you could talk about this to Kansas City Chiefs fans as well, is that he's, in terms of play calling, right, he's a decent play caller, but the run game, especially in his best years with Chicago, was atrocious. it was beyond atrocious. I mean, I have the numbers here. So as the Bears play caller from 2018 to 2021, they were 27th in EPA per play, 22nd in success rate, 25th in drop back EPA, 24th in rush EPA. And again, having a bad run game to pair with that, obviously isn't that good. And then when you look at the best yards per attempt under that 12-4 season, they were 21st in the league, which again, I know some people, they're going to look at it in hindsight and say, well, you had Mitch Trubisky, look at the skill players around him. Their offensive line wasn't that good. But then you also look at the remaining years with the Chicago Bears. 2019, they go 8-8. 2020, they go 8-8. 2011, ultimately after he gets fired, they go 6-11. But all of those years, their run game wasn't that good, right? And you could argue as well that their passing game wasn't that great either. So I'm kind of with you guys. I'm kind of like, I want to wait and see how this hire is going to be. But I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys and say that I was excited when I got that notification, seeing that John Harbaugh and the Giants were going to hire Matt Nagy as their OC. I wasn't. But I also want to preface that if we would have gotten the notification that Cliff Kingsbury was going to be the guy that gets hired, I probably would have had a similar reaction, to be honest with you. I would have felt like it was a fairly uninspiring hire. And I think that when you look at so many teams in the NFL, right, getting new offensive coordinators, getting new head coaches, right? And the Giants, I'm not going to say that they were sitting on their hands, right? Because they did make some moves. They went and signed Denard Wilson as their DC. They went and got Chris Horton as their special teams coordinator. They brought in an offensive line coach assistant, right? I believe they also brought in a wide receiver coach as well. So it's not like necessarily that they've been sitting on their hands, but I do think that this is a result of teams getting ahead of the curve and hiring young, inspiring offensive coordinators, guys that are, they're taking a chance on and are hoping to bolster their team. And I don't know necessarily if that's what this is for the New York Giants. So I have my hesitations. There are certain things about Matt Nagy that you could take away from and be like, okay, like this should translate well for the New York Giants. Again, you look at Allen Robinson's production. No disrespect to Allen Robinson. I'm a fan of him. Obviously with his stint here, it didn't go as planned, but Malik Neighbors is miles ahead of Allen Robinson, even in Allen Robinson's prime, right? Jackson Dart. It's only been 1 year. I understand that Mitch Trubisky had a fairly impressive rookie season as well. But at the same time, I don't think that they're the same quarterback. And I think ultimately, this is going to be a better run team than obviously what Matt Nagy had in Chicago. He's not the head coach. There's a difference. I think a lot of people have to take away what he did in Chicago as a head coach and what he's going to do as an offensive coordinator. He's going to have less responsibility. He's going to be able to hone in and focus on this offense, focus on Jackson Dart's development. Hopefully, we don't see a recurring theme like we saw in Chicago where the run game was bad, because obviously you have guys like Cam Scatterbo coming back from injury. You have Tyrell Tracy, who, I think a lot of people slept on Tyrell Tracy last year. I feel like a lot of people kind of forgot who Tyrell Tracy was and the production that he had as a rookie for us. So you obviously don't want that, right, for those guys. But ultimately, though, it's kind of wait and see. That's kind of how I feel about it. But let's get to some of these comments. Again, we apologize for the, I don't know if it's the camera. I don't know if it's my signal. Never really had this issue before, so we apologize. So we got Coach Ed in the building. Peace, bro. Tap in to show love and respect. Appreciate you, Coach Ed. Hope you're doing great, man. We got Giants guy 8202. Hey, he says Harbaugh sucks. Couldn't even bring in a good OC here. I mean, in his defense, right? Because obviously he wanted Todd Monken. There were reports that he even called Todd Monken, trying to talk him out of taking the Cleveland job, which, let's be honest here, Giants fan to Giants fan. Can you blame him, right? If that's someone that you have a lengthy history with, can you blame him for wanting to talk someone that he has a solid relationship with and try to bring him over to a more stable organization than the Cleveland Browns? I don't. But at the same time, I don't blame Todd Monken either for taking that job because there's only so many head coaching vacancies available. He probably wasn't going to get another shot at being a head coach in the NFL when you consider age, when you consider guys that are probably going to be coming up within the ranks that didn't get hired this year, that will probably be looking to get hired next year, a la, obviously Chris Shula, Nate Shieldhouse from the Rams as well, just to name a few. So I don't blame him necessarily for taking him. And hey, who knows? We don't know. Tom Monken could get fired within a year, 2 years, and he comes back to the New York Giants and becomes ROC, and we don't know. So, but I get it though. I understand the frustration. I just think it's a little too early to get on John Harbaugh, right? I think that we could acknowledge that it's an uninspiring hire. It's not a hire that's gonna have you going up and down and saying, "Hey, we got the guy." Our offense is going to be, kicking in all cylinders. We can hope that, but given Matt Nagy's history, yeah, you already know I'm gonna go with that. Chris says Giants guy needs to chill out. Hey, man, listen. We're all going to have our opinions, right? There's going to be some fans that are going to overreact. You're going to have some fans that are, that are not going to really care, which, hey, I try to remain neutral in that aspect with telling people how to fan and like what to do, what not to do. Because listen, none of us can control the outcome, right? None of us will have a say in who they hire, who they fire, the product that we see on the field. All we can do is just kind of take it day by day and hope that obviously that things go the right direction, especially when you hire someone who, let's be honest, was not very high on their list. And you can kind of make an argument that they didn't really have a choice but to hire when you look at the criteria for what John Harbaugh wants in his coordinators. So, I think this is just a result of all of these other coaching vacancies opening up and, guys plucking different people from different trees. And this isn't the first hire where the Giants got screwed out of, right? Especially when you look at the defensive coordinators that they were looking at, when you look at obviously the OC, the Giants have been kind of getting screwed throughout this offseason, but that's just the way the game goes. So you just got to charge it to the game. Now, I want to say this much, right? I do think that with the hire of Matt Nagy, one thing that really enticed him, because we know that he interviewed for the Tennessee Titans, right? But he didn't get that job. Obviously, Saleh gets it, and then Brian Dable gets it. We saw him get replaced in Kansas City with Eric Bieniemy. Came out that actually his contract ran out in Kansas City. It wasn't like he, was fired or that, he stepped down, anything like that. His contract ran out. It happens. But I do think that this is a good opportunity for Matt Nagy to get himself a second chance at a head coaching vacancy. This is going to be a good opportunity for Matt Nagy to kind of scrub the taint that's on his name right now in terms of, his name, because obviously the first thing that we think of is his failures in Chicago. Despite the successes, the failures are going to kind of highlight over that, considering the fact that even in the playoffs, he wasn't that successful either. I'm not going to put that missed kick on him, but still. Again, I want to see how this turns out. I don't want to overreact too much, but I just think that right now, this is just a result of all obviously different guys getting plucked and, the Giants kind of try to cross their T's and dot their I's, and this is who they land on. Again, I would have felt the same way if we hired Cliff Kingsbury myself. But that's just me, though. Let's see here. Giants guy says Giants can sign a homeless guy and Giants fans will be okay with it. I mean, some would. Obviously, I'm not, and most Giants fans would not. But I do think that there are a lot of fans who are going to be of the mind that John Harbaugh can't do no wrong. We have to trust the process, which is true, right? For right now, all we can do is trust the process. The season's not even over yet, right? I think a lot of people forget that the Super Bowl is this upcoming weekend. Like the season's not even over yet. We got to give this some time, right? So that's where how do you say? I guess that's where the giving the benefit of the doubt, and trusting the process comes from. Now, if in a year from now we're having a conversation of, okay, like, should we potentially move off of Matt Nagy? This is what we saw during the season. This is what we liked. This is what we didn't like. Then we can have that conversation. But I do think that for right now, it's an okay hire. I don't think that it's the worst hire that we've seen as Giants fans. Me personally, I do think that for right now, again, I know I kind of sound like a broken record, but I am going to trust John Harbaugh until he gives me a reason not to trust him, right? And again, I think that this is just, regardless of who they hired, for me, the main focal point was, can we bring someone in here that can, you know, really, really help with Jackson Dart's development? Can they help Jackson Dart, get to the next level that we believe that he can get to, right? Because we saw flashes this year without a wide receiver one, without his running back one, with guys dropping. So I mean, I believe I got to get his name. There was a Giants content creator who clipped up all the drops, especially touchdown drops from the New York Giants this past year, and had some of those been caught, I mean, I think that it would be undisputed that Jackson Dart is the offensive rookie of the year. So you hope that with a healthy Malik Neighbors, healthy Cam Scatterbo, let's see what they do in free agency in the draft. You hope that this could be a hire that takes this New York Giants offense to where we think that they could be when healthy. But again, I'm not going to be upset or get on people for feeling any kind of way, whether that's positive or negative. But yeah, that's really it. I think that again, they're still going to be bringing some people inside. We still haven't hired an offensive line coach. I do think though, with obviously, because we spoke about how Matt Nagy's run game is historically not good. It's not. It's actually really bad, if we're being honest. It's near bottom of the league. I think it is critical for the New York Giants to hire a run game coordinator. As an offensive coordinator, I would have hated this hire. As a run game coordinator, I actually wouldn't mind this hire. And that's them going out and getting Greg Roman. Now, look, as an offensive coordinator, I would have despised the hire. I would have been furious on this channel. But I think as a run game coordinator, though, that actually wouldn't be a bad idea. Because when you look at Greg Roman throughout his tenure as a offensive coordinator, as a play caller, he has a very good run attack, right? Just look at the Los Angeles Chargers this past season. I mean, their run game, despite missing their two bookend tackles, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that their running back room is bad, but, it's nothing to brag home about. They were fairly effective, right? And then you look at his tenure with the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, Lamar is a unicorn. There is no other Lamar Jackson in the NFL, but Jackson Dart does have the ability to make plays with his legs. Cam Scatterbo is going to run through someone's face. Tyrone Tracy could get it both done through the ground, through the air. If you bring in a guy like Greg Roman to be your run game coordinator, you should kind of balance out the negative with Matt Nagy, right? But that's just me. Maybe I'm just thinking about it a little bit too deep. But man, it's not who I wanted. It's not who I'm sure most Giants fans wanted. But for right now, we just have to wait and see. We have to take this day by day. Let's see what they do in free agency. Let's see what they do in the draft. This could end up being a good hire. But ultimately, I think that, this is a critical hire. And whether it goes good or whether it goes bad, it could potentially just be a one-year stint. But thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode. We appreciate everyone for stopping by here. Again, we apologize for the camera difficulties here. We're definitely going to get that situated for the next stream. We're going to be going live, I believe, Friday. We're looking to be going live in the evening, have that be a call-in show. So if you guys would like to come in and talk about your favorite hires or the hires that you've disliked, or maybe even players that you're looking at in free agency, who knows? Maybe we'll even talk Super Bowl picks. We're going to be doing that Friday evening. That's going to be a lot of fun. So you guys will be able to call in. If you guys have not already, you can find us on all social media platforms under The Giant Topic. go hit that subscribe button, leave a like below. We're trying to hit 700 subscribers on this channel. We're almost there. And I know that we could do it, especially before free agency starts. But again, let us know your thoughts below. We appreciate you guys stopping by, and we'll see you guys on the next video.